Impressions to click-through rate. It is one of YouTube's most important, yet most mysterious numbers. Ever since YouTube first introduced it, all the way back in 2018, man, that feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? Everybody has been asking this question. What is good CTR? Well, if you want the short answer, it is anything above 7%. Alright, time for the long answer. There was a time when YouTube support pages would tell you this, that half of all channels and videos on YouTube have an impressions to click-through rate of between 2 and 10%. But it doesn't say that anymore. It doesn't give you any concrete numbers at all, and there's probably a very good reason for that. That's because when an expectation is set, people complain when they meet it and absolutely nothing happens. If YouTube says the top end of typical CTR is 10% and I'm getting more than that, why is my video not blowing up? And from the creator's point of view, that is a fair question to ask, but it's a question that lacks context. And without context, CTR is almost meaningless. So in order to understand what is good CTR, we have to go all the way back to the beginning and ask the simplest question of all. Well, unfortunately, we can't answer that until we know what click-through rate is calculated against, and those are impressions. So what's an impression? This is your thumbnail and title. It will appear all over the place on YouTube, and when it's displayed to a viewer for longer than a second and the user can see at least 50% of a thumbnail, that counts as a single impression for that video. Now, it can get a little technical as to when impressions count and don't count, but let's say in a perfect YouTube world, one person saw your thumbnail and title and clicked on it. Well done, that's a click-through rate of 100%. But of course, it's not as simple as that, because you're not the only person on YouTube, and the user could decide to click on none of the videos and carry on swiping to see more stuff. This is where you start to talk about huge numbers when it comes to impressions on YouTube. Let me give you a very basic example. Let's say you launch a video and in its first 24 hours, it gets 1,000 impressions, and you get 100 views from those 1,000 impressions. That's a very basic click-through rate of 10%. YouTube users are both spoilt for choice and bombarded with viewing options, so it makes sense that only a small percentage of any thumbnail and title is ever clicked on. I mean, if you had no prior knowledge of any of these creators, which one would you click on? Yeah, me too. That green really stands out. Well played, Mr. Beast. Well played. Here's where things get a little more complicated and quite vague. Impressions are not a fixed value. They're influenced by YouTube's algorithm, otherwise known as the recommendation system. And there is a hint here as to how it works. You can increase the chance of YouTube suggesting your content by increasing your click-through rate and your video watch time. In other words, if a video is performing well in key metrics, YouTube will support that video further by giving it more impressions. That is a very basic principle of how videos go viral. And of course, this text leads to another question. What is good watch time or audience view duration? Well, we've got an answer to that. Yeah, this needs a little more explaining, doesn't it? We'll make a video on it. Now, all of this means there is a knock-on effect. If impressions are not fixed, therefore click-through rate is fluid. When YouTube recommends your content, impressions go up. YouTube is testing it with new audiences. But because it's been tested with new audiences, not familiar with your content, you're likely to get less clicks because that audience is less invested in your content. As a result, your click-through rate may go down. But this is not a bad thing. Far from it, in fact. You want as many impressions on your content as possible because it's basically free advertising. The challenge you face as a creator is that YouTube controls this advertising budget. How much are they willing to spend on your video? Forgive my terrible graph animation skills, but in a perfect YouTube world, your click-through rate would increase. YouTube would then share that content with more people, your impressions go up, but your click-through rate may drop a little. But as that new audience discovers and likes your content, the CTR increases again, and YouTube spends even more impressions on your videos. So, armed with all of this information, let me ask you the following question. Which would you prefer? In the short term, the answer to this question might be B, but in the long term, the answer to this question might be A. And that's why click-through rate is so hard to pin down. Context is king, and we barely scratch the surface. But if we do ask about click-through rate at a surface level, this is the answer you will get. I asked the vidIQ community to go to the YouTube studio and bring up their channel click-through rate for their entire channel over the last 28 days. If you want, you can do the same thing right now and pop your results in the comments below. More than 11,000 of you answered the call, and these are the results. Oh, and by the way, this was the short answer I was referring to earlier. Almost 65% of you report a click-through rate of 7% or less, which is why I suggest a good click-through rate is anything above that. But remember, context is king, and this question barely has any of that. I mean, where do I start with this? Well, first of all of this click-through rate is calculated from absolutely everything on your channel, all of these impressions, and it doesn't take into account the age of any of the videos on your channel. For example, I published this video 2 years ago, but it still gets impressions, 1,400 over the last 28 days, which contributes to the total, and an outrageously high click-through rate. On the other hand, this video is just over a month old, has contributed almost 500,000 impressions, but has a terrible click-through rate. You see, click-through rate can fluctuate rapidly from hour to hour, especially in the first 24 hours of a video's life. You can even see this in real time by going to the analytics of a video and changing the time period to the first 24 hours. Over in the Reach tab through the click-through rate, YouTube will track that metric by the hour. So when you compare this to this, you can see now why I call this the short answer. As well as video age, you also have to consider something that is almost impossible to measure, and that is competition. Let me give you a very basic example of what I'm trying to say here. Let's say you make a video that gets 25% click-through rate. That sounds pretty awesome, right? But what if, in some very weird YouTube universe, there was only one other video on the same topic as yours, and that video had a click-through rate of 75%? Well, now your video sucks, and YouTube is likely to recommend the competitive video more often. Now, if you take this example into the real YouTube universe, you're talking about tens of thousands of creators and often millions of videos within a topic. But the amount of competition still may vary greatly from one topic to the next. Let's say you make gaming videos and your click-through rate is just over 7%, which doesn't sound too great. But because you're in such a competitive and saturated topic on YouTube, your videos actually outperform the topic average. On the other hand, a cryptocurrency channel may have a click-through rate of over 10%, which appears to be very strong. But because there is much less competition in the video topic, the average click-through rate is above 12%. So we have video age that impacts click-through rate, we've got video competition that impacts click-through rate, and we also have video traffic sources. To get to this level of detail, you'll need to go into the Advanced Analytics for a video and then go to the Traffic Sources tab. This will now divide your video up into different categories, all of which have different click-through rates. You can also sort by the click-through rate column to reveal some really interesting insights. In this example, the video has double the click-through rate from YouTube search than suggested videos, but people on average watch a video for 2 minutes longer via suggested traffic. The general consensus here is that click-through rate is far more valuable in home, browse and suggested than it is in search. And that's all to do with viewer intent. When a viewer is seeking out content, typically they are looking for an answer to a question as quickly as possible. And once they have it, they're not sticking around. However, when the viewer watches something that YouTube has recommended to them, then the viewer intent is probably more casual. They're looking for something to watch to relax over a longer period of time. This is why channels which get a lot of traffic from search often struggle with the challenge of watch time and subscribers. The intent of their viewers is very single-minded. They want an answer to a question and get on with their lives. So with everything we've already explored, are we any closer to answering the question, what is good click-through rate? No, not really. There are just far too many variables from channel to channel, from video to video. So let me show you what I've been up to try and answer this question at an individual channel level. Again, at a surface level, you can use this panel in the YouTube Studio Analytics to let YouTube give you an approximate idea of a video's CTR. But to drill into the details, for the past few months, I have been manually tracking click-through rate over the first 24 hours of a video's life on the vidIQ channel. I've been doing the same thing for views as well, and as I gather more data, I'm starting to understand the expected video velocity the moment it's published. So much so that I've set up and continue to tweak conditions that show me when videos are performing above expectation or below expectation. After conducting this experiment for 3 months and having 25 videos worth of data, I now am starting to establish some concrete numbers for the channel. If the video has above 12% click-through rate in the first hour, it's likely to be a good performer for the channel. On the other hand, if a video has a click-through rate of less than 7% in the first hour, then I need to make some changes pretty quickly. I've also been tracking impressions in the first 24 hours to see if particular video topics attract more promotion by YouTube. I thought monetization would be a dead cert for more impressions, but as you can see, the numbers still vary wildly from video to video. And does previous video performance impact future video discoverability? Well, anecdotally, this video has really popped on our channel, and 2 out of the next 3 videos on the channel got more impressions than usual, except this one about monetization. But that video just so happens to be the shortest video of the 4 shown here. Does that make any difference? I will be the first to admit that I am a very amateur data scientist, so I find collecting these numbers really fascinating. But the questions they have raised so far have brought inconclusive answers. So am I any closer to finding out what a good click-through rate is for the vidIQ channel? Yeah, kind of. I am developing a stronger instinctive feel for when things might be going right or wrong with a video the moment it goes live and whether or not to take action. But the longer a video is live, the more data you have to untangle and the more variables you have to contend with. Perhaps what I've done here is fallen into the trap I warn all creators about, trying to find a magic number to attach to a metric. Now, naturally, within the community poll, people did start to compare themselves to others in terms of click-through rate, which, especially in the YouTube world, is an exercise in motivational insanity. I mean, at a surface level, this channel has higher click-through rate than the vidIQ channel. So why on earth do we have 1 million more subscribers? Where's the justice? And then we have the theories, with this creator believing that YouTube will push a video out to a wider audience once it's settled at 4%. Now, I don't dispute this. In fact, I reckon this theory comes directly from the creator's experience on YouTube. Within their video topic, their target audience, and the traffic sources they gain views from, they are probably right that 4% is the medium range for a video's performance. But that number doesn't align with the vidIQ channel or likely any other channel on YouTube. And then I came across this comment, which perhaps sums up where so many of us so often go wrong. I could probably talk to you for another hour on the question of what is good click-through rate and be no closer to the answer. And maybe that's because I, along with millions of other creators, still haven't answered the biggest question of all. Who should be watching my content? Why should they be watching my content? And how do I get them to watch my content? If you know the answer to those questions, then you have a better understanding of the psychology of your candidate viewer. And when you know what makes that viewer tick, you will know how to get them to click. So let me throw this question over to you. What would you like to watch on the vidIQ channel? Let us know in the comments below, because I'm sure if I make it, you will watch it. And if you do want to know more about how to make the perfect video for the perfect viewer of your channel, then make sure to watch this video over here.